if you can really quickly, I know you've been here a while, would you two go head to head on Russia, Ukraine, and NATO and the European Union for a little bit?
Oh, it's the night's late.
Yeah, okay.
I will be as
Yeah.
concise as possible, though. Um, Everyone needs a good enemy. Russia can act as that enemy. NATO is an armed forces that it might include Turkey as well, but is basically a European army. The Europeans don't have their own army. This is what it is. It also connects America with the home continent. If I could devise a like Apollonian armed forces, I would recreate NATO. So why would I oppose it? I understand that NATO is gay or globo homo or whatever you want to say, but the world is gay and globo homo. I mean, that's not NATO's a problem. I think that it's a real tragedy that we're forgetting about Ukraine, and I think the Ukraine question brought up real questions about like who are we as the West, and I think those are good. So if I were to be as concise as possible, that's how I would do it.
That's an interesting take. I'm merely in favor of Russia because I like to see the U.S. regime humiliated, and I think that the more that American influence in the world diminishes, the better it is for dissidents in America. Because I'm just very threatened by liberal hegemony.
Can you
And
expand on that and play that out? Because I've heard you say that before,
what?
but you kind of just stopped there about why that is. Why is that the case? That if American power diminishes, it's good for dissidents in the country.
I've never stopped at that point. I've always said that I'm a perfect example of this. In the United States, I can't have a bank account. I can't have payment processing. I can't have access to social media. Theoretically, if there is some world order where we can access a Chinese service for those types of things, or even if it becomes inhospitable for a person like me to live in the United States, anywhere that's under the security umbrella of China or Russia, I would be safe. Edward Snowden, when he betrayed the NSA, where did he go? He couldn't go to anywhere in the world other than Russia.
Yeah, but they're friendly to him
because only Russia could protect him.
Yeah, but are they not friendly to him out of spite of America? Not necessarily because they believe in his cause. Like, do you really think China and Russia?
What difference does it make?
No, it makes a huge
difference. Does it make?
Well, I mean, they would just use you as a pawn, and that you're assuming they would even use you at all. I mean, Russia.
It's arbitrage. It's dissent arbitrage. The United States welcomes Russia and China's dissidents. Russia and China welcome America's dissidents. It's the same reason the American colonists got support during the American Revolution from France. And yeah, there was some ideological kinship there as well. But they also did it because they hated the British. And a free America countered the British. And same thing with Germany releasing Lenin into Russia during the Russian Revolution, which secured Brest-Litovsk. But guess who was in Eastern Europe after World War II? So, there's an international component to the domestic political struggle as well. There always has been. So this is not novel. It's not a novel take.
Sure, but that's like a large sacrifice for a small hedge. I mean, in some senses, and you can understand this, it sounds personal. It sounds like you're saying you have an avenue to get out of here if shit hits the fan, rather than actually looking at it as like a global or geopolitical conflict. As far as like, you don't actually want China to have like global dominance, do you? I mean,
yes, I do.
No,
yes,
come
I
on.
do.
Like,
yes,
objectively, that would not be good for you, even you personally.
Of course, it would be good for me. It would be good for everybody.
No,
it would be good for everybody. Look at.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might have to disagree with you.
Of China. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, they're going to turn you into a Chinese, Nick, and they're going to treat you like they treat the Chinese. Maybe for 5 minutes, they'll be like, "Oh, Nick really pisses off like people we hate. We give him payment processor. Like he caused great harm to evil American Yankee." Like that might happen for 5 minutes, but the idea of living in a Chinese world. I mean, here, I guess I am kind of a dyed-in-the-wool conservative wasp or something. Like the idea of living under Chinese hegemony is something I would not wish on my enemies, actually. Or I would wish on my enemies.
I'm being a little contrarian. I don't really want China to control the world. I will say this, though. Chinese hegemony would look different from American hegemony because China is an inward-facing country. It always has been. So,
Mm-hmm.
people do a lot of fear mongering, and they say they create this idea that like we'll be under a Chinese occupation, and I don't think that's what it would look like necessarily. Regardless, though, the point stands: America will be a superpower throughout this century. It's just that America will not have the kind of uncontested dominance and influence it has in the world. And that does actually mean that it's better for dissidents. It means that, for example, things like TikTok. TikTok saw the rise of a guy like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, and even some of these other things that proliferate on TikTok, could never proliferate on American social media. That's because ByteDance jurisdiction is in China. And so I think, it's just like with the immigrants coming over here. I don't want immigrants to be in America, but it's useful that they're against Israel. Similarly, China and Russia are regaining their sort of historical place in the world. It was an aberration of history that China and Russia have been so relatively weak for the last 30 years. It was necessary and inevitable that they would retake this position. Again, I see this as an opportunity to discredit the current regime. And I also see it as an opportunity. And, you say it's personal, but it's really a distinction without a difference. I am the ultimate dissident, in a sense. I mean, or one of the ultimate dissidents. If there's going to be dissent, it's going to come from a guy like me. I mean, if I can't dissent, who can? Because I'm the one that's, one of the most censored and one of the most ostracized or whatever.
Even in recent American history, whenever you have a large opposition force, you can see that the dominant party actually gets more power. I mean, just look 20 years ago, like George Bush, for example. Let's say George Bush was fighting a power that was greater than Afghanistan and Iraq. What do you think would happen? Do you think we'd get more Patriot Acts? Yeah, we'd get it tenfold. Like we'd get 40, 50 more years of Nikki Haley, George Bush type politics. Like, if anything, if Americans see Russia and China and all these countries gaining power, do they not get behind the people who are in power to say we want to push back against it? I just don't see the avenue that you're seeing as far as the dissidents go. I mean, you see China not liking. I mean, you don't want to be a Jackson Hinkle for China, do you? I mean, if anything, just out of principle, that's kind of pathetic. I mean,
that's just a non-argument, though.
Jackson Hinkle is like clearly a Russian asset. I mean, like, do you disagree with that?
Shill, but saying,
no, I'm not saying it's a shilling thing.
Jackson Hinkle. I mean, that's not an argument, though.
Okay, right. Fine. Then you can put that aside. Everything I said before that is still relevant. I don't believe that your avenue as a dissident is impacted positively towards you in any way just because China becomes powerful. The logic doesn't follow, and I think a lot of this, even if you don't understand it, subconsciously comes from spite, because the state has kind of put their thumb on you, and that's annoyed you, and you have every right to say like that's fucked up, and it is, and you gain support from it, but then to go out and say, okay, because of this, I'm now anti-American, I'm pro-American but anti-American at the same time. It's just convoluted and kind of silly. I mean, you have to see that.
I don't know. I don't think it's convoluted. I don't think it's silly because the regime that is over there in Ukraine and that is over there in Israel and Afghanistan, it's the same. It's literally the same people that are attacking dissidents. It's literally the same people that are funneling the refugees into the country. And when you say it's anti-American, it's not anti-American. America goes into these other countries and spreads poison. It's not a good regime. Now, here's the thing. If the regime was people that I liked, then I would want the regime to be strong and I would want them to dominate China and dominate Russia and all these other people. But it's the wrong regime. And so I'm in favor of a total regime change and displacing these people. And if that means that there's sort of like this collapse in their credibility and authority, I support that. Like, for example, when we get pushed out of Afghanistan and we lose the war in Ukraine, this is all the current regime losing credibility. It's the current regime that's losing respect. It's the current regime that's losing resources and failing. I support all of that. And I think that all of that hastens the end of the current regime. I mean, what you're arguing is that we should empower the regime. That the
No, I just
regime
don't think
should
that you should
have
be.
influence in more places, and it should be wealthier, and it should be the reigning champion of the world. I don't see how that benefits people that seek the end of the regime.
I won't
let
go on
me
much further, but
yeah let me submit something. I think there is a actually kind of fascinating contradiction though, Nick, because I think your instincts are to be pro-American, good old-fashioned old-time religion, that kind of stuff, and those are healthy instincts. But then as you've interacted in the world and faced these enemies and so on, you've got a little bit of that let it burn accelerationism. And those two things actually are, I mean, and I'm not even saying this as like a criticism, because I think we all, containing contradictions is kind of good. There really is a contradiction, because like the American regime falling is also going to be the fall of Trump and MAGA. I mean, the whole thing is going to go down. It's not like there's just liberals there and they lose in Ukraine and then Trump takes over. I mean, Trump is part of the thing that's going to fall. And I also agree that I think we're headed for a crisis. So it's it's contradictory and it's complicated at the same time. There is something interesting about kind of like you're America first, but then an enemy of America at the same time. Because what is America first? What do you mean by that? Like, is it because when John McCain says America first, he means the military, basically. That's what America is in his mind. It's just bases and wars and stuff like that. When other people say America first, I think they do mean something else. They almost mean the opposite of that. No more military around the world. Let's stay at home. Let's be more introverted and so on. So I think sometimes big ideas get conflated in that way. But I think the position that you're in is unique. It's similar to my position, but we've taken different paths. But it's like you're anti-American and the ultimate American at the same time, and you'll express those feelings with equal vigor. It's just where you are.
Well, it's because of, what is America then? And when you look at, like, when we say that the United States is supporting Ukraine, what do we mean? We mean that the American state is supporting Ukraine, and the American state are the decision makers inside the state, and they have a certain ideological affinity, and they come from an educational pedigree, and they have all these ties. And I just think it would be silly to sort of, on the one hand, recognize that they are destroying America and they're sort of behind the wheel of America's decline. They're oppressing anybody that tries to reverse this. But then we're also supposed to cheer them on. I mean, to me, that's the contradiction, is to say, like, well, when Milley says that he's tracking white nationalists and learning how they think by reading extremists, we're supposed to be, boo, fuck you, you're a traitor. But then when he says, we're going to show Putin what's up, we're supposed to say, no, but I want him to lead the military and crush Russia. It's like, I want those people to be gone, which means I want them to fail in all their endeavors. And like I said, I think that the rise of China and Russia hastens that. And I think those are perfect examples, is Lenin and Russia, because obviously the Russian Revolution was the defeat of Russia, the total unequivocal surrender of Russia to its enemies. And, but 20 years later, that wasn't the case. And it was a true change in leadership. And, I think that's just sort of a necessary component that happens. I don't know that America can be dominant and uncontested, but also undergo regime change. I don't see how those things happen simultaneously.
That's a fair point. I do think that what's going to come after the American empire is going to be worse. I don't know.
There?
All over the world, I think it's going to be worse. This is where I used to be a Ron Paul person, maybe a little bit like you, where it's like, bring the troops home and like we'll just trade with each other and friendship.
No, I think America should be as big and as powerful as possible.
Okay.
But just not under the trans flag.
I understand, but you kind of, yeah. Okay.
I think you guys agree on that point, more or less. Wouldn't you agree with that, Richard? I mean,
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I'm glad you say it that way. I'm glad I'm not talking to one of these goofy paleos who's like, oh, I want my small town to be
a
sovereign.
republic, not an empire. It's like,
Right. Like, fuck you.
Hey,
I
Nick,
want Rockford, Illinois to be a sovereign state. We'll have foreign policy with Pawtucket.
a republic, if you can keep it.
Right.
What?